I won't publish it publicly, but a few people asked me if I would record it so that I could, so they could watch it later. So, all right. So this is my blank making process. I've got my, let's see here. Got my blank here still on the forming pen. I could ream it, but it's all the way down to this hilt, so it's not really going to do anything. I find I get more reaming when, see, it's all the way down to where I want it to go anyway. So I really ream on day 2 after it's sort of swelled up. Okay, so I'm just going to soak it with this thing in there so it'll still fit on the book hole. Make sure the second wire is getting soaked as well, because we need that to be snug. Obviously, this will continue soaking. So in my reed style, and I think in most American reed styles, you need this second wire to be pretty tight. So what I do, I pull out a little bit. You can see that little triangle right there underneath the wire, twisting that down. I generally prefer to twist and pull at the same time. Okay. And then what I look for here is I only want the stem to move. I want this stuff up here right by the base of the wire, the actual ring that's going around the reed. I want that to be still, so it's not tight enough yet. See, it's still moving a little bit. So, okay. And now you see only the stem is moving, the base is not moving at all. So we'll flip that down. First wire is pretty good. It's a little loose. You can see that gap right there, gap in the wires. So I'm going to clean that up. Again, twist and pull at the same time. You want to feel, let the wire tell you when it's done. Don't feel like you have to twist a certain amount. I can feel when, okay, it's snug, I could twist it more, but it's not, it's going to kind of choke the cane. All right, so there's that. All of these I would check again on day 2. Usually they change a little bit as you play on it. Just that, it's now already hard to get off mandrel. Okay, let me get this. My audio coming through okay? Yeah, looks like it. Cool, thanks. Yeah, I think this is the best tip cutter, but they have this, this is the Rieger. Some people use the end nippers really well. It just has never worked for me super well, but I've never practiced it that much. So they're much more affordable. There's an Italian made guillotine style that's really good too. And one place you can get that is Nexus Woodwind. I think they're about $140. This Rieger one is overpriced at something like $250. So, all right, so I'm going for 28 millimeters from the top of the first wire. So I'm currently at about 29.8, I'd say. So I need to basically take off 2 millimeters. And that's now when I use these little marks here. Always go conservative. You can always take off more. So now we're at about 28.5. Can it focus? Almost. There we go. 28.5, 28.75, something like that. A little bit more here. That's what this guillotine is really good at. It's really good at taking off like 0.5 millimeter or 1/4 of a millimeter. All right, 28. I'd say that's about 28.3 maybe, but sort of as good as I can get it. There we go, it's almost it. So, no, that's too much. It's really 28.4. Let's get it down. Okay, now let's see where we are one more time. 28.3, I'll take it. Okay, so the first thing I do, just look at soap again, is put the collar in. I just use one of these hobby blades. This stuff is all pretty universal. I don't think there's a good way or bad way to do this. Although you can over tighten the wires. Is that on the screen? Yes, it is. It's not focused though. It's in the right spot. One thing a lot of my students at Oberlin tend to do, which is a little counterproductive, they'll come in here with this and they'll go at a really steep angle and they'll kind of scoop the cane and they'll get a really low, this will be too, they'll go too deep. So what I try to do, I don't care, you see I'm getting nothing off, it's fine. Just go again, you know. What you don't want to do is dig in and take off too much. So just go as many times as you need to. Just get that collar started. I finish it with a file. Helps if your razor blade isn't dull as hell, but that's okay. Okay, other side. Now I'm already starting to assess the reed as I do this. So for me, this reed already looks like the tube is very narrow. It looks more narrow than normal. So that's just in the back of my mind, okay? It's probably gonna make it better at high notes. It's probably gonna make it sharper at first. It's probably gonna make the sound more focused. And I'm already thinking about, well, okay, is it soft cane? And when I formed it, it got too narrow, or did I just over tighten the wires? But this is quite narrow for me already as a blank. Let me see if I have some a little bit flatter here, wider. Something like this, you can see that's a more wide tube. That one's probably flatter and wider than my normal, but this one's more narrow than my normal. Maybe this one's standard and this one's narrow, but I'm already thinking, okay, this might be a rite of spring reed. This might be a high note reed, something like that. But okay, let's see. So you can see it's really messy. You look at it, I took some chunks out. It's totally fine. I'm gonna clean this up with the file now. This is a monster file that I got on Amazon. It is a 6-inch Grobet 00, but it's really good for just sort of this early stuff where there's not a lot of nuance to it. Now, if you're ordering cane, you may want to already check on a dial indicator. How thick is the back? Because you never know how they profiled it, how carefully they profiled it. Maybe they over soaked the cane, and so the cane swelled up and now the profile is too thin. You know, you just never know. So it's always good to check. And honestly, I should check too, because I know what my profiler is, but I could have over soaked the cane, and now profiler is different. So there's that. Let's see here. I don't know if I can do this backwards so you can see it. It's kind of gonna work, isn't it? Let me switch to this. Oh yeah, that'll work. Okay, so getting about 30, that's really thin already. So that's not good. I went too far. That's okay. I'd rather this be about 35, 36 on day one. Wow. All right, so that's, let me check my other dial indicator, make sure something's not messed up. But that's not a good sign. So we're already in damage control here. This is already strange. So either my profiler's messed up or this was somebody else's profiler that I was trying. Yeah, wow, I'm way under 30 already. So that's not ideal. Maybe it just didn't soak. Hopefully that one's at what, 32, 33? This one, 28. Okay, so that wasn't me. I promise I didn't scrape that much. Normally, my read would be at something like 38, and what I just scraped it down to would be like 35. But somehow, you know, this, maybe the gouge was messed up, who knows? But anyway, so that's another factor now in my mind, which also is not great considering the tube's narrow. But anyway, all this is beside the point. So now let's put in the tip. That's the next thing I do. Let me take these little corners off, which will kind of stab your tongue. So you can see the tip's very thick. So it's not going to play at all yet. The way I do this is something Richard Bean taught me, and I think Ben Kamens does this. Just take a gem razor blade. Needs to be gem because the others aren't sharp enough. This is the one that most oboists use. And I can use this for 4 or 5 reeds. So it's not too, they're more expensive than the cheapo ones, but they're not that expensive. I've had one box of 100 that cost $20 for, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. And so now I come in here, let's see if I can get the better lighting. And I'm at a 45-degree angle. And once again, I don't want to scoop. I don't want to do that. I want to just go straight down. I'll get to this more later, but we just don't want a scooping gesture almost ever in the reed making process. It just isn't really going to work that well. Straight down, basically at a 45-degree angle. If it won't cut, what you need to do is put it at the angle you want and then pull towards you. So put it at the angle and pull this way, and that'll make the reed slice. That'll make the cane slice or the blade slice, rather than getting it to go by scooping. All right, so now you can see tip has a little indentation there. It's a little bit better here. And now I'm going to rough out the tip because we're getting into now, to me, the most important thing on day one to get the reed working is for the reed to taper. What does that mean? It just means it needs to go down from the center to the side and from the back to the front. So right now, got all kinds of thick spots. This up here, who's this? This up here is thicker than this. So this doesn't go down to here, it actually goes up to there. So that's what I'm gonna do as I rough out the tip. I'm just gonna make it go down everywhere. And actually, I'm gonna use this. I'm using the front edge of this now. I'm not using the whole thing like I did at the back. There's one more feature that I want to, for some reason, this profile, this is strange. This must not be my profile. This channel, you can see there's a channel. So it's thick here, thin in the channel, and then the rail is quite thick again. you can see a pretty substantial rail, if I can get that to focus. So that's really thick. Let me go to my diagram. This will be easier to talk about there. So on this diagram, you want taper. What does taper mean? Well, taper is, and let me move this over here. Taper is two things to me. It's both a convex curve. Whoa, that wasn't good. So it's a convex curve. What does that mean? Just that it slopes like this, not like this. We don't, this is what I'm talking about, that swooping motion. We don't usually want that in a reed unless it's intentional. So convex curve and gets thinner. So you see the center of the reed is an 8, the side over here is a 4. So those two elements are what I'm looking for in a taper. Now, most often my reeds are this middle thing here. So you have a nice curve here, it's convex. It doesn't do this, it doesn't swoop, but it doesn't go down. 8 thick in the middle, 8 thick on the side. These are just made up numbers. It's not anything I measure. This reed actually has what I find most often in my students, where you don't have a convex curve, you have a concave curve. So you have like this, and actually, because now this is the point we have to fix from, the rail is actually too thick even. So we have a little bit different, oh no, that's hard to undo, situation, because it's still thick at least. So I'm dealing with a thick thing like this. And so the rail is too thick, this is too thin, and this is too thick. So that's what I'm going to be putting in. That's what a taper is to me. That's what I'm going to fix on this reed. To me, this is the most fundamental thing in a reed. So it's what I try to get on day one. Anything else, and I will sort of just mix things up. Like you can't tell what's going on if the tapers are weird, because just strange stuff will happen. All right, so let's see now. Let me just show you how I will rough out the tip. You can see I'm working on the rail a lot. Any questions or thoughts about that? Let me mark it with a pencil too. So this taper was messed up. It was too thin here. So I'm working out here to fix that. And this taper is messed up because this is too thick here, it's too thin here, and that's okay. So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm going to work a lot in here, work along these edges, but this is all dependent upon your reed and your profile. None of this is prescriptive. You know, don't do this on your reed if it doesn't need it, right? That's why I started with tapers. You just want to fix the tapers. Okay. Still see it with my eyes. It's just not right yet. It's just not even a read. So there's no point in even testing this thing yet, because any data I got from how it plays, it just doesn't, the read isn't in the ballpark. So none of the data would make any sense. It's just not significant. Okay, so let's look at the two sides. Here's the one I fixed. You can see everything, you know, really goes down in a nice convex way. Here's the other side. Rails are too thick for the channels. Tip is too thick for the middle. So let me fix that. This is a very simple redesign. It's maybe not what you'll end up with. It certainly doesn't work for all bassoons, but I think it's a good starting point. It's sort of the basic thing, and then you can move on to something more complicated or something that more suits your bassoon as the days go on. But on day one, I just kind of want to get everything in the ballpark. I want to take every element to 90% finished. So in this read, you've sort of got the channels are already 90% finished, but the rails are only 80% finished. So the rails are too thick. I need to get them to 90%. Because I overscraped the back, not realizing the profiler was so thin, the back is like 95% finished or 100 or even 105% finished. So now I need to scrape the tip to balance that out. I've tried reed making styles where you say, like, some reed makers will finish the tip completely, so 100% the tip, and then as they work on the reed, they finish the back. For me, I've never been able to work with that because I seem to find, at least on my bassoon and my playing style, it's like the reed doesn't play well until the very last minute, and so I don't know. It's harder to time it that way for me. Whereas if I get everything at 90% and then 95% and then 97%, that seems to just work with my strategy. So there's that. Sort of just roughed out. But look at how open the tip is. This is not going to play at all, which is good because, as I was saying, it's already too wide. So now we can close the tip down by flattening the first wire. Oops, let's put it in again. Could round the second wire to also would close the tip, but the second wire is already plenty round. So I'm just going to do it all by flattening the first wire. So now this tip is still too open for me. That's not what I would normally do. I normally go for about 1 millimeter tip opening. This is like maybe 1.3 or something. It's not too far off. But I think that's coming from, the back being too thin. That's actually acting as a lever and it's popping the tip open. So again, it's too open for a reason. I don't need to, like if I flatten this further, now I'm putting the first wire in a weird shape. I put the first wire in a really flat shape. So I'm just going to leave it. Hopefully it will close down as we test it. But so I'm going to try it now. I don't really think it's going to play much or work, but let's find out. Let's see if the low back maybe helps it work sooner than it should. I should say too, this is a bell bassoon. With every bassoon, you're going to make reeds differently, but this is what I would do for this bassoon. So let me make sure this audio doesn't get too loud. Way too loud. Sorry. Let's try this. Okay, so the first thing I notice is the E natural falls. So that's probably because the back's way over scraped. And the reed in general is over scraped. But maybe it's also, I had left it a little bit too long. So instead of being 28 exactly, it's 28.3. Maybe my wires are loose. Another thing I could have checked, I can check now, is the distance between the first and second wire. So I measure to the middle right there, to the middle right there. Whoops, was that in the camera? Middle right there to middle right there. 8.5 is good. So I'm good with that. That's not the cause of it. But that much dropping of the tenor E, it's not going to work. So let's see. Look, now that's gotten looser. So I'm going to fix that first wire. And I think too, confirming the suspicion earlier, soft cane is going to give you a very narrow tube, and it's also going to be much flatter. So that both opened the tip and made the reed sharper. Tip's quite open now. Let's try it one more time. Can you still hear my voice at this volume okay? It's still not going to work. It's just too flat. I cannot leave it like this. Some people will leave it and try it again the next day. For me, it's just not acceptable. So yeah, you can see it's really 28.4, 28.3, depending on the angle I look at it from. But I've just got to get this thing working. So take it really all the way down to 28. I'm eyeballing up here. I'm not really looking at this thing anymore. Still a little bit. I'm still over by a 1/10 of a millimeter, something like that. And this is really by feel. Just moved it up a smidge. See, I took off paper thin amounts. Right at 28 now. That will bring the pitch up. That will stabilize it. Generally, that will make it darker. Although a smaller reed probably tends to be brighter. So you have that to contend with. And it may now force me to scrape the tip again, which would make it brighter again. So you never know what the net effect is going to be. Tip looks okay. I'm actually going to just put it in with this file this time. This is a Grobet diamond file, which has a Prop 65 toxicity warning, which is because it has nickel in it. So I don't love the idea of using something with a toxic heavy metal on a reed, which I'm going to put in my mouth all the time. So I only use this a little bit, and I make sure to wash the reed off really well. But for some reason, these really sharp diamond files, the sharp triangle diamond files, just work really well at the tip. So I can get exactly what I'm trying to get. A little bit better than a square Grobet, but I need to try one of these. So this is also Grobet. This is like a square, just a standard file, standard Grobet file. And this one does not contain any toxic heavy metals, but it's just not quite as good for some reason at doing the tip. Now, because the reed was flat and, you know, it was weak and flat, I'm actually leaving this as thick as I can. I'm not, this is actually less tip than I would normally do. But again, you just want to compensate for everything that you've got going on. So there's the tip. You can see it's just, now it's a nice smooth concave curve. And here curves down to there, and down to here. So let's see if that brought the pitch up enough to play it. The crow is really flat. I can already feel that the crow is just going to be tough. So this may just be a reed that's never going to work. I mean, a lot of this is probably, again, the back being way too thin because I did not realize that the profiler was a different profiler. I don't have anything, something was labeled here and you can see it's washed away. So that's my bad. Let me make sure I got it all the way down. So, okay, here's what you might do with this reed. It's probably not going to be good for a while. I'm going to have to wait for it to harden up before it really will play anything. Now I could cut it down to 27.5 millimeter length and that would fix the E, but that's now outside of the ballpark, like sort of it's outside of the parameters of the reed I'm trying to make. And so because the back is already over finished, I just need to wait for the rest of the reed to catch up to the back. So I need to wait for the hardness of the reed and the age of the reed to catch up to the back. This is not ideal, but I don't want to start all the way over. So let me show you a few things I might practice here. Let's see if we can get this here. Okay, so on a reed like this, you could sit there and practice Tchaikovsky 6 for a few days. You know, so it's great down there. I could also sit here and practice in the low register, you know. And it's fine down there. Because I just want to beat this reed up a little bit so it ages and then it'll harden up and hopefully I can salvage it into something that will play. One other test I'd want to mention is a low B flat test. So I find this helps. I usually do this on day 2 or 3, but with this reed, we might as well do it now. And the premise of this is you play 10 low B flats in a row. They all have to be green on the tuner, and you're not allowed to miss any. If you miss any, it means the reed is too hard and doesn't respond. If you play any sharp, it means the reed isn't strong enough and won't hold the pitch for you. So let's see where this reed is. So it's pretty good. I mean, there's pitch is a little unstable, but basically it's either flat and I get them all out. To me, that's like something a day 2 or 3 read should do. So again, it's just another example, another way of saying this read is scraped too far for day 1. If it were a normal read, what I do is play a scale 3 octaves, and I'm not allowed to miss any notes due to like they fade out. It's too hard to speak. And ideally too, even on day 1, I'd like to start mezzo piano, crescendo to mezzo forte. So that missing notes at the end there was me, and I was not using the right air. And the reed is too weak, so it's over scraped again. For a day 1 reed, it's too weak. Now I could open the wire, that would fix it, that would make it stronger, but then the tip would be way too open. This is already a pretty open tip for me. So I'm just gonna leave it. That's what I would do. That's my day 1. I'm going to intentionally not, normally I would dry this on the forming pin. As you can see, it was all the way down here, but it's already swollen up. I want this to swell up a ton inside the tube so that I can ream it a ton, and that will also make it sharper, because that's my goal now with this reed. So that's my day 1 scrape. Always damage control. I think the big lesson learned here was always measure with the dial indicator, because you never know what the profile you're dealing with is. So I guess this was somebody else's profiler or something I ordered from online, and I didn't realize the profile's thick. I mean, you can see it's really chewed up still back here, because I don't even want to fix that because it's already too thin. I'd rather have it chewed up and not smooth, because I just need as much cane back here as possible, because it's already too little cane back there. So that's my day 1 scrape. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on that? Let me unpin myself.
I have a question, Drew.
Yeah.
When do you start measuring other parts of the reed besides the back part of the reed? Like on day 1, I would measure also like the critical point and the back, and then like halfway between those points as well. So I'm just curious, like when do you do that sort of measurement in your process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I should have thought of that. On a normal reed, it would be day 1. Because normally the reed's going to be sharp. Oh, did I do that wrong? I want this view. How did I do this before? Here we go. So yeah, normally on a day 1 reed, the reed would be sharp and unresponsive and too hard. Kind of the opposite of this reed. So in this case, yeah, I would measure 1, 2, 3/8. Some people will call that the critical point, or 2 1/2/8, either one. And about 24 thousandths of an inch is what I'm going for there. This is again actually really close, already at 25, so that's telling me it's quite thick. And then the other one for me is 1/8, so right behind the tip. That's at 20, which is quite thick for me, but again, this reed plays. Just trying to show you where I'm measuring. It's just behind the tip. And then you said halfway. I like that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. That's my halfway. So that's about right there. And for that, my finished reed will be at something like 27. So we're at 30. That's good for me for day 1. But I would totally start doing that when on a normal reed, it wouldn't respond. It wouldn't be, so I'd play the 3-octave scale and stuff wouldn't come out. Well, that's unacceptable. So I've got to make the reed weaker, more resonant, more vibrant. And so that's when I would look at those points and say, oh, wow, it's 7 over my measurements. I'm going to work there. And if you don't have a dial, for people who don't have a dial indicator, base it off of um, just sort of, if the reed doesn't respond, let that bias you towards the tip. If the reed doesn't respond, let that bias you towards the middle, and go from there. But really, to know your profiler, you need a dial indicator or use your teacher's dial indicator and get a sense of, this is where I'm going to scrape. So yeah, does that, what do you do, Christina?
Yeah, I think I always start by measuring it first before I start doing any of the scraping. I also am extremely lazy, so I use a tip profiler to do most of the work, you know. I also just don't have the amount of time to spend like working down the tip like you did. Although that is better for your reads, you know, it does make them last longer. And so yeah, I mean, like I start and I do these measurements and then I decide, like, you know, of course I always start at the tip, and like I do what you say, how I play on it. Like I do the first third of the read and I play on it, and then I start into the second third of the read and play on it, and then I go into the back third, because like if it starts working how I want it to in the first third, then I'll play on it for a few days before moving into the second third, because it always hardens up, you know. So I don't know, I try and save myself from over scraping my reads, I suppose.
For sure, yeah, no, that makes sense. That's awesome. I definitely use, when I use the tip profiler, my only complaint with it is it puts some big channels in that I then have to go and try to get them back to like this, because I like my reads like this, and so that's my only thing with the tip profiler. But some people, again, their read design has this, and I think, to me, it makes sense. Sometimes a read, like that read I was just playing, is way too bright to ever play in a rehearsal or anything, or in orchestra. It just sounds, it's not acceptable. So if you're at day 7 and your read sounds really bright and you can't play on it, you know, either practice on it alone in your room or put this in the channels, and then it'll darken it up, or, you know, take the rails down, it'll darken it up. Yeah, my only other thought on that, and thank you for bringing that up, it made me remember, you know, I find a lot of my students actually, so the reed doesn't respond, and they just immediately finish the tip. So they'll take the reed, the tip is 100% done on day 1 or 2. And the only problem with that is then I feel like there's this sort of imbalance between the reed, like this is done and you can never scrape it again. And it's kind of like the reverse of this reed, actually, where the back is done and I'm going to have to do everything at the tip. But I think sometimes the signs for me that the reed doesn't respond, you know, maybe it's actually the back is crazy thick. Some of those signs will be like, I can see the rails are really thick. On this reed, that's not the case. The rails look okay. Looks pretty thick right there, I'd say. I'm not showing it. Whoops, here we go. So that rail looks a little thick to me. If we didn't have this issue with the back, I would fix that. Another thing would be, you know, the low register specifically doesn't come out. My teacher Bill, our teacher Bill, Christina would always tell me, you know, imagine like these 2 triangles, and if the vibrations can't get all the way back here to the back, your low register won't respond. So sometimes my students' reads, they're finished in front of this line, but this back here is super thick. And so the vibration goes up to this line and stops, and then they can't get their low notes out. These are sort of instances where I would work on the back, even in the beginning. Another one would be if the sound is very shallow, I find that's a sign that maybe only the tip is vibrating, only the very front of the reed is vibrating. Whereas like on this reed, the back's way too thin. It's still a bright reed, but the sound has depth to it. The sound is kind of balanced. And so, you know, I think that's, you know, something that you can do when you need to work in the back and it's early in the process. That's sort of some of the signs that I look for to say, well, do I want to work on the tip more or in the back? But some of my students solve everything by working at the tip, and then their back is never finished. And I think that redesign works with a really dark bassoon, but if your bassoon is bright at all, I don't think that works as well usually. So, other thoughts?
Hi.
Hey, Chris.
I was wondering how you go about responding to reads that are too hard for the profile intended. How would you approach that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think if you have a dial indicator, that's a nice way to do things. And let me also give a caveat with the dial indicator. To me, the dial is permission to scrape the middle. And I only measure the middle. I find I can't, unless you have a special dial indicator little tip thing, so if you have a special one of these things, you can maybe measure the sides. Like I know the Winstead school, he has a circular thing, and so he measures the channel and the rail and all that. But for me, like this, this measurement right here at the tip was way over where I'm putting this dot. That was way over what I would normally have on a day one. And it's way over my finished read, but I'm still not going to scrape it. Like the dial isn't prescriptive because this read doesn't need that. It responds fine. It's already too weak. So taking out of the middle isn't really going to help this read much. But I guess my answer is I would look at, do you have a dial, Chris? Dial indicator?
I do. I don't really use it though.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to I can email you some measurements that I use as sort of ballparks. But I think even without a dial, and many people make reads with no dial at all. So what they're doing is they either know their profile really well. Like, so Ben Kamens is one person who doesn't use a dial much at all. He just uses it to check his profile. He knows this dot right here is finished on his profiler. And so he's checking his profiler all the time. And he knows he's going to taper everything away from this dot. So it's all by eye at that point for someone like that. And so again, that gets back to the idea of the tapers where you're just trying to look and you're trying to see like, does the read, this is the hardest one to see right here, this situation. And this is what most new reads have. So it's hard to tell that you've got your side is just as thick as the middle because this is technically curving downward, but that's just the slope of the gouge. These lines are parallel. They're just both curving. You know what I mean? So you need to use your eye. Like, so if this is your back and this is your front.
So I can't really see what you're writing down.
You can't see it? Okay, let me get it better. Let me do this better here. Let's do let me get this all off. Okay, so let's say, here's your read. This is the back. And this is the front, right? So you think, well, the back is higher than the front, right? But it's not thicker than the front. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. They're both 8 units thick or whatever. So if that's what you've got, then you need to taper the front down to here. So now it's 4 units thick. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you're just using your eye. You could replace this. This could be the center of the reed, and this could be the side. This could be the rail. And it's that same thing. So you're just looking meticulously like, okay, does this actually go down here, or is that just the curvature of the gouge, right? It's easier to see this way because the gouge is not curving this direction. So it's easier to see back to front. But when you're looking here to here, you're trying to say, is that actually just as thick as the middle, or is it getting narrower here? So that's what I would say, Chris. I'd say the thing to watch out for, I mean, most people know, okay, it doesn't respond, I'm going to work in the tip or in the middle. Watch out for the rails in the back, or not the rails, I should say the sides in the back are really thick. So that's what I would see. That's what I see people neglect often, is sort of the sides in the back. So, if you had your reed here, and you divided it into 6 things, 6 little, this is a spine, channel, rail, rail. Oftentimes people will, finish this or put in their thumbnail or whatever, and this is like completely gone, sort of like the back of my read. So that area will be 110% finished. But the real issue is they identified the problem correctly. Too much cane on the reed, need to scrape. Well, really the problem is like this all here, this rail and maybe even this channel or, in between the two, this is the same thickness as this. So you basically don't have a taper. You just have, this thing. It looks like a taper because look at the surface. Yeah, this is higher and this is lower, but really this is 8 thick and this is 8 thick. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is where I would say most people miss when they are on a day one read. But that's just maybe in my experience. Maybe that's with my profiler that we have at Oberlin. My students have this tendency. But I think this is where Christina's point about the dial indicator really helps, because the point that you can't really see, I mean, I guess you could see this point like this. I don't know how to do it. Right at the back, you could see that versus the collar. So you could see the height difference maybe. Like you can see on my read, the height difference is enormous because this is way too thin for the collar, which I should have seen earlier. But yeah, that's sort of what I would try. Just try it and see if that helps anything.
Would you mind demonstrating maybe with like a dead reed how you would go about actually like scraping or putting in your spine? Because I've never actually seen somebody do that. That's typically because if you're profiling, for most people it's set to where they want it or near where they want it. And if there's outliers, then that's just cane they won't use.
Yes, that's a good point. Let me find a blank. I'll just scrape the back first. Yeah, for some reason, I guess my profiler got thinner or something, but let me scrape the back of this reed, this blank actually, and just show you that. So okay, so yeah, pretend we've got a reed. One other symptom of this is the symptom of these green circles being too thick. Yeah, so those green circles are thick. Your tip will look like this. That thing is not going to play like that. An ideal tip would maybe be something more like this, sort of got some diamondy quality to it. I mean, this is also not an ideal tip. But this is more of what the read that we just did has. That for a day one, it's a little collapsy. That's why I've got the wires so open. But so anyway, we want this blue one right here. And so notice, Chris, if your read has that just tip that's like really honking open, you know what I mean? So let's assume we have that on this fake read. Tip is honking open. And we identify, we really don't have any tapers in the back. So what would that look like? Well, for me, it's just, it's hard to do without a collar. I'm going to cut the collar. And I'm going to cut this collar extra carefully in case it has the same problem as my last read. The moral of that story too is don't change your profile all the time like I do. Just stick with something and master that one profile. Okay.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. I'm always like, oh no, I'll find this better thing. It'll save me time, No, it just you end up ruining half the reads. Okay, so again, day one, the tip doesn't close at all with a diamond shape. I'm taking this crazy thick file. What did I say it was? 00 6-inch file. I'm just doing that. So I'm sort of extrapolating in my mind what angle did I set up right here? And then I'm asking, does that continue down through here? Does that angle continue sort of congruently, or does it do this? And I need to, it's sort of like broken, where the angle you established up here doesn't continue to agree, the angle switches. So just making sure that angle continues to agree. Now, let me say too, that everything is a dichotomy, and there's a point at which it's optimal. Many of my students will also destroy the rails on day one. That's really bad too. And maybe the worst, that's actually maybe worse. Like this read, I'm not throwing it away yet, because I still have some rails, I still have some dynamics, I still have some resonance in the read. If you do the scrape we're doing now and you go too far and you kill the rails or you kill the back, you can really ruin a read. So obviously be mindful of that. But yeah, this is just sort of what I do. I just sort of get in there and make sure that curvature continues. All of this is just, like a rib cage of a whale or something. Like all of these curves are actual tapers, That's sort of going back to, let me go back to this other image. Oh, I can't read my phone with the read shadings on it. So this is the other one you want to avoid. This is kind of when you've killed the rails and you've killed the read. Do you have a read, Chris, you want to play or try or?
Sure. This is actually a Drew Pattison from Barton.
Oh, cool. How is it?
I found a lot of these to be too hard.
They are thicker for sure. That was one of my changes. It's very similar to the Billy Short and the Kristen Wolf Jensen. And
so I use too hard, not in relation to thickness, but to the scraping quality that I get when I first receive it. I find it's very hard to get cane off, which to me is a sign of hardness.
Sure. So just hard cane in general, yeah. And that's unfortunately the problem with, like, you never know, each batch will be different,
And that was actually doing a lot of the work that you were talking about while we were here.
That sounds great. Can you play a tongued 3-octave B flats? Is this a day one read?
This is a day one. I clipped it today.
Okay, yeah, play a tongues 3-octave scale. Let's see how that. Yeah, awesome. So that's actually, I think you were asking exactly the right question, which to me, if my thing will scroll, you just need, that sounds like, so it sounds like it has plenty of strength, and yet it just doesn't want to go down in this bottom range. Would you say that's right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think probably the tip opening is very round, sort of like this green thing. So the tip opening looks like that. It's kind of like you had no trouble playing high. So I would look at, even forget all this rail channel crap, just sort of like, just make sure this isn't crazy thick. And the way it sounds right now, the other thing that's tipping me off to thinking that's thick is, I think like the sound is a little spread. So it's kind of like ba, 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 ba. And that, I don't think that's you. I just think that's the quality of the reed. And so reeds that don't taper will give you that.
Yeah, this has less focus in the middle.
but it sounds like it responds pretty well. So that's like a confusing thing, right? Where like some of those low notes didn't want to come out, but everywhere else it kind of responds well and it sounds vibrant. I think the fact that it's vibrant and you had good dynamics and you had richness in the read, that also makes me think, okay, you could trade some of your rails or your sides of the read. Even just do it like this. Just say you have center of the read and sides of the read. The way that played makes me think sides of the read. And then the other thing that makes me think the back half of the read was it was like lower register stuff. So that would put me first in this quadrant, probably. Then maybe in this quadrant, go blue. And then third, I'd be looking like, maybe up here. But, it's like there's something about your read, kind of sounds like it does respond. It's like response is such a complicated word because like it sounded like those low notes didn't want to come out, but not due to response, like maybe due to hardness.
Yep.
So again, when I think hardness is an issue, that makes me think back. It's more an issue of hardness than response. Maybe that's what it should be. It's like, okay, get notes out is like one tier, and then there can be two causes of that, like hardness and response. So you have to get the notes out, but I think you actually have response. It was this that caused you to not, you got all the notes out, but they didn't want to come out.
Right.
So that's what I would, and again, all of this is like, just test it. And then if it works, then that's it,
Now for the timeline, because this is all I've done on day one, and a lot of what you're talking about is what I focused on. I'm wondering going forward, because I typically prefer medium soft cane. This to me is hard, and I'm worried that fighting the hardness as it continues to harden over time, while it's already hard, is just a battle that needs balance.
Right. And so I think just with that in mind, I would, with that read, knowing it's like that, you might look at the back more. Just because, so if you lower, if you have a read that's more of a parallel scrape versus a steep scrape, so this is the back, this is the front. This read with this bottom read is going to be, harder, more stable, etc. This read is going to be less stable, more free, stuff like that. So I think just with that particular type of cane, you're going to have to bias it towards, probably towards the back. Or at least at this time, because maybe you do the back for day 2 and 3, and then you're like, whoa, actually now I've weakened it too much. And now you'll have this situation like this read that I did today, where like I'm going to be focused all in the front because the back is way too thin, It's also soft cane. So yeah, this is like the opposite of your read in every way, I think. And your read sounds good, and this read is kind of like, maybe, it might work out. But I think here's another thing I'll say, by day 3 or 4, if the read isn't good enough on hardness, I would go to town on it. Like at that point, you have less to lose. It's sort of like, well, I don't want to waste time on this read, so I'm just going to go ahead and really take it down. So.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. Thank you for bringing that read. You're like saving. That's the read I wanted to be playing on right now because there's like actually more to talk about, I think. But yeah, feel free. Let me know, like, send me an email or anything. Let me know how that works out because I'd be interested to hear if that helps. Nikita says, if I have a good read, can I take those dial indicator measurements, scrape sand a blank, and get the same results on day 1 or 2? If I have a good read, can I take those down? I'm not quite sure, like, are you saying, can I take it to the same dial indicator measurements every time? I guess I think I would be a little more flexible with them, use them as a ballpark. I use the dial again as like, so all the way that it plays and the way that it looks makes me want to scrape the middle. Then I use the dial to just make sure I'm not too thin. So, but I would say the dial can be helpful for getting you in the ballpark, perhaps. So Chris, that could be something, check your back. I'd say 36 is about usually my day one. Sure, Nikita. So like if your back is at 38 and we could convert it if you have millimeter.
Yeah, what is the imperial that you're saying?
Imperial 36.
So 36
like
of an inch.
I think 36,000th. I think it's like 70 something is the 36 inch to 0.0036 inch to millimeter. Let's see. Yeah, so that's 0.91 or not, it'd be like 91 or something on your dial. That's where I'd go day one at the back. Even down, now the way your read is playing, you could go down to 86 even, I'd say. I would personally. And that's measuring this is doing something like this for everybody. Getting right in front of the collar, make sure too it's aligned this way. Obviously, like if you're off here, that's not going to be accurate. It's got to be right in line in the middle. It's much easier to see in person. And then I like to sort of just tap here and make sure it goes all the way down. This is totally an inaccurate measurement because it's saying 40, but that's not at all. This isn't meant to be held horizontal.
My dial is actually reading about 1.25 millimeters.
Wow, super thick.
Yeah, that's my back.
So that's what I would say is your first thing to take down there. Did you cut the collar?
I decided not to, just because I noticed it was cut by Barton and I didn't want to overdo anything.
Of course. I think that's a good sign. So Nikita, this is how I would use the day one stuff is like, he's got 1.25 millimeters. My day one, what did we say it was 0.91, I think? Yeah. Yeah, so 0.91. So that's that's actually like 30% over. So that's where I would go. So that's how I would use the dial, sort of like the way his read plays. We wanted to scrape the back, and then the dial just said, yes, you have permission. You're not, looking at my read. Yeah. Maybe let me write out too. I'll write out my dial measurements that I use. So, and these are from Sakakini, George Sakakini, and he got them from Van Hosen. So these are all 1/8 of an inch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then back. So these are 1/8 of an inch back from tip. And then these are my finish measurements. So let's do finish. And then I'll do day one. So 15, maybe up to 20. Like this read that we were just playing was 20. 20 here. 24. This is the critical point that Christina was referring to. Maybe it's right here. Maybe it's 2.5. This was the one I think Christina was you know, similar to Christina's halfway back. So maybe this is actually like back here. None of this is going to scale, obviously. But this one, I actually never worked on this with sarcopenia, but Judy Leclerc gave me this measurement, 27 thousandths. So that's sort of where I'd go. I'd say day one, 27 for this critical point for me. This thing back here, 30 maybe, 30, 32. And then the back, 36. Finished reads probably 33-ish. So that, sorry to be so wishy-washy, Nikita. I think that's the thing, is like you gotta almost, you know, you just gotta respond to what the read is sort of giving you. But you could use these ballparks. So this is the day one ballparks. 20, 27 at the critical point, 30 at the halfway point or something, and then 36 at the back. I think that would, like doing that, if you took the read down to those 4 measurements on day one, that would never hurt your read, in my opinion. Like that's the, whoops, that's the outside, that's the thickest they'll ever be for me. So I think those are safe. And this was like 91. Yeah, I forget what the rest were, but we could just convert on Chris. Other questions? Cool. Yeah. I mean, this is interesting. So the back, you know, like Cayman's read would be like a 36 is the minimum. So he might start at like 38, 39. But generally when I've seen his reads and his students' reads, he's kind of like, he has the profiler set up so that the back is really already at 36. So he's like got this point finished, and then he has this critical point right at 24, and then he scrapes from there, you know. But you know, John Clauser's back will be like, finished back will be like 26. Sakakini's finished back will be like 30. You know, I'm using 33. It, sort of, again, it all depends on the bassoon I'm playing on, the you know, am I playing an audition? That might have a higher back. I think a higher back is going to give you more stability. The reed will kind of play more like a mouthpiece. So no matter how you blow, it's going to center for you. Versus if you take the back lower, you're going to get maybe a deeper sound, like a more resonant sound, but you'll have less control, less stability. So it might be better for solo playing, where you can kind of just play mezzo piano to forte the whole time. You know, you don't need to taper down to niente or something like you would in orchestra. So yeah, I think that's why it's so tough to say, Nikita, why it's not like, but that's why it's tough for me to say, I guess. So. Using 1.2 at the back, 25 in a minute. Okay, cool. Let me just double check that. So 1.2 at the back would be 47. Wow, that's really thick. That's cool. I think that's just a totally different reed style. Chris, what would you say your reed style? I mean, is that, or Chris or Nikita, is that more of like a European reed style with like 1.2 at the back?
I mean, typically I switch between American and European. That's that's just because of the cane I have access to.
Yeah.
So like I have some reeds that are 57 millimeters long, that are thick but also soft. and they tend to last longer, but they also take a bit more blowing resistance, and
Yeah.
that requires, of course, a bit more manipulation with the embouchure at times.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think there's so many different ways to go with this stuff. And, it's great. Everyone's got to find, like Nikita was saying, that's just how she likes the end result. So
Yeah,
it's cool.
I'm studying with Stefan Levesque at McGill, and he makes more European style reeds, but with a Fox 2 shape. So the reeds are about 57 millimeters, and everything's pretty thick in comparison to what I had done before.
Nice. Okay, what were you doing before?
Not really measuring things.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, mine are 55 millimeters in total length.
mhm. Yeah, I would
Yeah,
typically
that's cool.
be around 54, 55 before.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I think again, yeah, you've got to, if you're auditioning for his orchestra and he's principal, you probably want to make his read, his
Yeah.
style of read. And so probably a lot of this would go out the window on that style of read. Like maybe you must leave the back really thick. I mean, Cayman's leaves the back really thick for good reason. Like it's his reed style. It goes with his bassoon. It goes with the way he's going to blow. It goes with how far onto the reed is he going to put his embouchure. It's all like a package deal. So,
Yeah.
But hopefully some of this, like the idea of the tapers, I just want to get people thinking universally, kind of like. How the different tapers are going to affect different things. Yeah. So I'm trying to think, any other questions, any other thoughts and stuff on this? Let's see.
What do you check for flexibility? Like flooring intervals.
That's a good
when you're
question.
diagnosing a reed.
Yeah, that would be something I check very much closer to the end of the process. But I think like Pulcinella excerpt, do you know that excerpt?
Yeah.
Those G to E slurs, that would be a good. So like this reed, which has no strength, and this reed isn't strong enough to do this probably. You hear it, can't even slur up there. This is that reed that was too weak. There's like, what's that Rossini? I think too, you can hear on this reed, the sides are too thick because it's really spread. It's really hard for me to get it to center. But flexibility, I think, to me, maybe Chris, it's like a day 5. I want the reed to be able to go pianissimo to fortissimo in tune. And again with the scale. I think too, my reeds tend to have high flexibility, so I don't really have good reed tests for that. My reed tests are more about, or my reeds fail because they all have good flexibility, but they're too spread or bright or something like that. And that's right. So that's an interesting question. What do you do for flexibility?
First of all, I check to see if it's me.
Yeah.
One sticky key, or maybe I'm not thinking too much about the sides of my embouchure, and of course that's not gonna help my intervals come out, especially the larger ones, or the ones that they share very similar overtones. But typically with a reed, I would focus, I guess, more on that center to side. and check the roundness of the wires, that sort of thing, especially the second wire.
Cool. That makes sense. I think another good test that came to mind would be Mozart Concerto first phrase, especially like measures 2 and 3. Da 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 da. That F to E flat is really a good, as I sing the wrong notes. That's a really good, I think, test of can your reed play a low note, not sharp, and can your reed play a tenor note, not flat? So what do you mean exactly, I guess, by flexibility? Because the way I think of it is like, I need it to center both of those notes, which are on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
I guess that's part of it. I mean, there's the two sides. There's, first being able to perform the interval, and then there's, the fine tuning of it. Because of course you don't want to go from, a sharp low F to a very flat E flat.
I think too, if you're talking about, like you were talking earlier about slurs coming out, I think it's different for which direction you're going. So like
Yeah,
if your slurs are not coming out downwards, that probably means the reed is too strong to me. And if your slurs are not coming up the other way, like this reed I'm playing on is way, way, way too weak. Because this taper from the back to the front is a joke. It's not a taper. This is the same thickness as this. So there's no taper here. So like that's very weakening to the reed. And there's also not a lot of taper from center to side because I can't scrape it because it's already too flat. So this is weak in two ways, right? It's like weak because normally I would have scraped more on the sides to give it center to side taper. And it's weak because the back is over scraped. So, but it slurs down really well. I bet it does at least.
Have either of you ever used the Mark Eubanks book for all the tests and scraping suggestions he has in it? Yeah, I really like that book. I think for, because you get a read and it gets to a point where you're like, okay, everything is how it's supposed to be. Like, what is going on now? Like, why can't I get this to be the read that I want it to be? And I've just found that book really useful to getting my reads to that actual like finished point. So
cool. Yeah, those are epic. There's so many of them. They're like so specific. So my low F is great. And then the E flat's like all over the place, not centered at all. I pinch to get it and then it doesn't come out. But yeah, so like this reed doesn't need any better slurs to downwards, but it needs way better slurs upwards. Chris, on your reads, what is the flexibility issue you're trying to solve most of the time?
I mean, it's inconsistent from read to read. I think for the most part, if I'm having those issues, it tends to be like those G's to E's, G to E flat, those intervals. And I think that's both up and down for the most part.
Okay. That to me then sounds like the reed doesn't center for you, which generally to me is like an issue with these diagonal tapers. Am I on the right screen? Nope. Someday I'll have a producer who just will switch the OBS for me. Yeah, so those tapers, like this point is, is the same. So you've got sort of like A to B, like barely tapering, and you really need A down to B. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then your tip opening will kind of not have that nice diamondy. It'll have more. That's not a good diamond. But it'll have too much of this thing, and then nothing will center,
Right. Right.
But this reed would have really good dynamics. It'd be really resonant. This is
Mhm.
kind of like the reed I have right now. Like basically the middle is too thin relative to the sides.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, there's some benefits to that. I mean, it'd be nice and rich, resonant. It's not going to be stuffy at all.
Mhm.
Yeah, that reed to me, like the lack of flexibility, I think point one, it just sounds like too much cane.
Mhm.
So that could be anywhere on the reed. If you take off cane, the reed you were playing will get more flexible.
Mhm.
But then it's a matter of where do you want that cane to come off, And so that's where I think you look into other things. Like, okay, is it really the response? So, okay, I'm going to the tip, or is the reed really stuffy? Well, then I'm going to the tip, and I'm going to the middle of the tip, So those are the things that might send you in a certain direction.
Mhm.
I don't worry about it being bright on day one usually.
Mhm.
But I do worry about if the sound sounds really spread, then I look and make sure my center to side tapers are actually happening. Not just this optical illusion where, well, yeah, it's not a taper. It goes down, but it's not actually getting shorter. It's got to both go down and get narrower. So this one's the actual taper. This one's just an optical illusion.
Mhm.
And that's all about, to me, that's like hard. That was hard. I feel like I learned a lot of this. I was watching Keith Bunky make reeds once, and he would he'd scrape like nothing. Like he'd get in here. On the screen, yeah. And he'd just sort of like, and then he'd look. So he'd scrape like that much, and then he'd look. And he just kept looking from the side view. So I think that's definitely something I took from him was like, yeah, and actually it looks really bad on this reed. So this reed doesn't need to be scraped more, but just for the sake of example, I don't have good tapers.
Mhm.
The rail is way too thick. I don't know if that's clear from this. Let's see if can I focus this close? No, buddy. Not really, but the rails are too thick. There's no taper there. So that's one reason this reed's really spready. It's one reason it doesn't slur up to that high E. The main reason is the back is too thick, too thin, but I don't have any tapers. So, and honestly, even though this reed doesn't need to be scraped more, if you put in tapers, it kind of trumps everything. It's just going to make it better, in my experience.
Mhm.
So, oh my gosh, these are terrible over here. Look at these. And this is what usually a profiler does anyway. Kind of just, some of you can see that over here just doesn't go down from there. So let me just, so I'm scraping back and forth like this, but I'm really only scraping a little bitty square right there. Because I want that square to be lower than this square. And when those two, when this square is lower, now I have a taper,
Mhm.
And so even though this is making the reed, which is already flat, this is making it even flatter. It's taking off cane makes it flatter. I just know I'm making it better, so I don't really care. It's just going to play better. It's not like I had a lot to lose because it didn't play well anyway, but this will make it play better. And this is my main goal on day one. It's just get the taper, get the reed in the ballpark, make it like a reed that works. It doesn't have any, it's a new reed, but you can't do anything about that other than time. But at least it won't have any issues based on the structure. Like this reed has issues based on structure, because this is too thin. But the other one that I can fix is this doesn't taper. And so at least now when I get this out tomorrow, I'll have a read that has the fundamental structure of a read, you know. So other thoughts or questions? Mia, where are you in read making? Where are you in the read making process and journey? Are you there, Mia?
I don't have a dial, so I'm confused about a lot of these terms. Like I've only been making reads for probably a year,
Okay. How
but
do you
this, yeah,
go ahead? No, go ahead.
I do have a problem with like my middle register being flat. So like you having that same problem has kind of like shown me like maybe that the back of my read is too thin.
Yeah. Good. And you check, you know, everything we checked. Blade length, check the distance here, check the tightness of your wires. You know, another thing with that, Mia, could be, so let's say if you leave this area really way too thick, center of the tip, that's going to make your back relatively similar. And so that could actually be making your back play like it's too thin, but actually you just have too much here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when I shave the corners or like the sides, I never really do the middle. I don't know how to describe the shape, but like it's less of like a rounded shape of like the tip and more like square, if that makes sense, like diamond shaped.
So you mean up here, like you do a diamond here,
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, I do a diamond like that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that could be it. Because what that's gonna do, like I know Kieseker did that, right, Christina?
I actually
so-
haven't. Oh. I thought you were talking about. Okay, never mind.
No. What were you saying, Mia? Go ahead.
I was gonna say that I was going to meet with Kieseker soon, but
Oh, awesome. Please say hi from me and Christina. That's
Yeah,
where I
from me
met
as well.
Christina, right? Was the Florida State Double Read Camp?
Yeah, but you were like a student, you were a camper and I was one of the instructors. But
I
yeah,
know, but I was like a senior and you were like a sophomore or something. We were like pretty close, right?
probably, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, Kieseker does that and so does Nancy Goris. She does the triangles on top as well. Or for the tip.
Yeah, and I think Whitney Crockett does that. I mean, that was the old Maxim, Stephen Maxim style, I think. And yeah, Mia, I think, you know, in some ways that, as far as I understand, that read style probably had a back similar to this, like a thinner back. And in a Garfield, this is also very Garfield style. Klauser has those too. So he has a really thin back, and then he has this triangle tip. And he has a read, Mia, that's very thick right here. So, you know, be careful, make sure you don't deviate too far from your read design. You know, ask your teacher if that's whose read design you're mimicking. But yeah, other things, Mia, that, you know, that could also be, so if your read is just really, really hard, by middle register, do you mean tenor? Tenor register, like,
I mean like my C on the staff, like C, D, E on the staff,
on top of bass clef staff or inside the staff?
inside the staff.
Okay, interesting. Those are flat, C, D, E.
It's mostly E, D, E, and F probably.
So kind of like this read.
Yeah.
So it may be just too weak. Yeah. I mean, this read, yeah, I think it's just it's too weak. But that's maybe different than like Chris's read, where it was really, they don't want to speak in the low register. Sometimes what goes with that is like flat in the tenor, because his read, maybe just the back is too thick. It's just going to make the read really hard. And so to get a tenor E flat to sit up to pitch, it's too hard to do that. So maybe Mia, our read is sort of a different issue, more weakness based. Mia, do you have a read you want to try? You want to play it and let us hear it?
Well, I don't think I'm too confident yet. It doesn't, also like my reads aren't they're not very consistent. Like I try to make them consistent, but like the lack of tools that I have makes it different every time. Like I don't have a tip cutter, so I use a razor, which is like really inconsistent.
Really
It's
hard.
like not smooth, and I have to work really hard to get it like completely straight. So
Yeah. Try go on Nexus Woodwind and either get his $140 guillotine style or get his $30 he has a $30 one that's like an end nipper. It's kind of like a, just like a thing that you would have with pliers, kind of like this. And that's easier than what you're doing. You're doing the hardest way, but it's the cheapest way. So it makes sense.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, don't feel embarrassed too. Like play if you want, because like it doesn't matter. I mean, no one can even see you, so it's all good. We're all just trying to figure this stuff out. I mean, you hear this crap that I'm playing on, like there's no shame in like, yeah, this reed's just not good. I messed up the back. It's probably soft cane anyway. That's how reed making it, like having bad reeds means you're doing it right, because you just got to have bad ones and then you have a few good ones somehow.
Mia, in my experience from doing the triangle scrape, since I am a Kieseker student, I got both my undergraduate and graduate degrees studying with him. If you have that point, so most people call it the heart of the reed, but when you do it with a triangle, I just think of it like, inside the attic of a house, at that point, if it's too thin, your reed is gonna be really flat. So, the hard thing about that style of reed is getting it to blend together, but not taking too much off of the attic, So like Drew, if you do a little circle in that, yeah, like right in there, like if you take too much off of that, you're going to lose like the structure of the reed of that tip design. So I wonder if you might want to just, experiment with different levels of thickness for it, but you still have to have that taper, even though you have those triangles in there. So it's a little trickier, to like blend it all together than it is if you do the thumbnail scrape. But like once you get it right, it's really, I think it works really well for like response, and also just getting the reeds to vibrate all the way through, like down to the collar. So, I mean, I know that, sorry, Drew, I'm not meaning to take over your
No, not at all.
your
This is great.
class here, but that
Not
would
at all.
be my advice for that style.
That's
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you, Christina.
What would you recommend? So I study with Dr. Huang right now at UCF, and she does like the same like triangle shape like in the corners, but she also like shaves the tip like all around, like just like straight across. So
Yeah.
would you think that what would you advise like with scraping the tip?
Yeah, so that's what Nancy Goris does. She has like the triangles, but then at the top she scrapes off the top. So it's more like, like a triangle with a flat top, right? And she does
Like this?
that. I can't see yours, sorry. All I see,
You see the drawing?
let me,
Oh, because I'm not.
can I, can I?
Maybe
Um,
the blue squiggle or something, or what?
no. So
Nancy
it goes
does, like,
right
a
across the
thumbnail
whole
plus?
tip. So just right across the whole tip.
Oh,
Mia,
I
tell me
see,
if I'm
just hidden.
incorrect. And yeah, right? Just there, Mia?
Yes, that and the
And the
corners.
triangles.
Yeah, the triangle.
Yeah, so what I
Yeah.
was hearing, Mia, and I was thinking, I think we're all three converging on this exact point, is like, you might have this at your tip. So here's like the heart. But if you have this flat spot at the tip where like, do you see that, Mia? Like there's no taper from here to there.
Yes.
So right there that I've circled in blue, if you have that, like, that's gonna do exactly what you're saying. And so that's where like cutting the tip is nice because, whoops, eraser. Now you can start over, and instead of having that angle that was like a flat angle, you can get actually like this concave angle all the way down to the very tip. And having that support rather than like, this is sort of what you had before, that flat spot right there will cause maybe what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. I actually have
So-
noticed that the corners have been a little bit like flat, like it's not round all the way.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so just leave like, this is the side view. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then up at the very tip, basically like if this is your thumbnail or whatever, if you want to make these triangles, basically it's like here to here. This is your A to B. And this is where you might have a flat spot, A to B. And so you need A to B, and then this is like A2 is up here. And then, that's what you need instead, rather than 3 parallel dots. I don't know. I want to have this plastered all over like the walls of my bedroom or something, like these reed sketches, just like a psychopath, like a serial killer or something, but you just have reed designs all over one of those bulletin boards.
I often say if like I was to die and someone came into my apartment and found my reed desk, that they'd think I was a crazy person. The pads of paper that I just have like numbers from each reed written on. Like,
right.
Yeah, so I completely understand that sentiment.
Yeah, and only Bassunis would get it. Only Bassunis would appreciate our crazy sketches. What do you think about that, Mia? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think just basically make your tip, and like Christina said, be careful right in there. Make sure that's not flat from there to there. So, cool. Other thoughts?
I just wanted to say, Drew, are you from Florida?
Yeah, I'm from Tallahassee.
You're from Tallahassee.
Yeah.
I'm also a Keseeker grad.
Oh,
That's
awesome.
where I did my undergrad. And I also wanted to let Mia know if she ever wants to work on reeds. I live near Disney, so we could do that.
Oh, nice.
I actually live in Orlando, so I'm like half an hour from Disney. So
Yeah, not very far at all. And you probably know Erica and
yeah,
all the UCF students,
Yes,
the Knights.
Fantastic. Yeah, Tallahassee, Florida, Bassoon Powerhouse.
Yeah, I'm in Miami, guys.
Oh, awesome.
I'm in Miami as well.
Oh, no way.
Who is that? Who said that?
Me, Fabio. I'm having a problem with internet connection because there is a really big rain, tropical storm. I don't know happening outside. So
Yeah, it's been very stormy today.
Mhm.
Drew, are your parents still in Florida?
They are just moving to North Carolina where they're from. So they're still down in the Keys, but haven't seen them in a little while just with COVID and with the, it's hard to get to the Keys because you either got to fly into Miami and rent a car or they have to drive like 3 hours up a narrow road. It's just not ideal, but yeah, so I haven't been back in a little while, but I miss it. I'm jealous. It's already cold here, up in Ohio. So, yeah. Fabio, do you have any reads you want to talk about or play?
Yes, I'm kind of figuring out like the style that I want to play, like to be more comfortable in my mouth with it. I have been like listening different classes with different and also with friends. I'm originally from Venezuela, so I have like many friends scattered around the world. So mostly I was what I'm working the most right now is about the balance of the reed, but more in a visual way, we could say. More than measuring the most. I'm also using the dial indicator to find like the balance between the two blades
Good.
on them.
Yes,
Yeah, it's mostly that.
that's a
Oh.
great point. Awesome. Did you ever work with Sakakini in Venezuela?
Well, yes. He went to Sakikini. He went to Venezuela when I was starting the bassoon. So it was like, what is happening here? Why is this people talking about reed making and stuff? So,
Right.
but yes,
Cool.
and also Maestro Versiglia was there, and Musman also showing the bassoons in that same festival, right? But I was
Awesome.
starting, so I didn't take like the most out of it.
Yeah, sure. That's awesome though. That's cool. Well, yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think this read style is very much, it's very easy in your mouth. You know, like you can play, I mean, I don't know what year you are in school or anything, but you know, this read style is like play a whole PR etude. You know, no breaks, 2 pages of music, constant playing. You know, or try, you could just play 2 melody scale studies back to back. Do not, you know, you literally finish the note, breathe once, and start the next one, you know. I think that's an interesting read test. You know, test how easy is your read to play. And again, I wouldn't play that read for a Weber concerto. There's plenty of rests in Weber concerto. I can play a really hard read, and I can rest more. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and what
That's
that
good.
was yeah, and that was happening to me exactly that I was playing Milde back to back, and I was getting too tired. My lips were, I was about to like collapse. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I was working mostly in that, like taking more read out of like material out of the read, because I found that maybe it was too hard. So yeah, I was basically working on that. Maybe
That's
see
awesome.
what comes up.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, I think that's really good. It's that type of read that's easier in your mouth is really good for auditions because it's so much about play the bet, you know, don't mess up. And
Right.
so you need a huge margin for error. Like we all mess up constantly. We're all just human, but somebody else, like if they get off 10% and their read is really forgiving, they won't mess up. But if you're on a read that's really difficult and you get off 10%, which is natural, we all get off 10% when we're tired, then you're going to miss a note. And so it's like, can you make a read that just plays like a mouthpiece? You know, like you just blow any way. Oh, I didn't even blow the right way, and it centers for you. So
Right. No, yeah,
that
exactly.
to me, I think of you know, sides and back, and but overall balance of the read. You know, you're trying to balance two things that oppose, because you need the read to be strong, and yet you need it to not be too hard. It's easy to be strong and too hard, or to be weak and very easy. But it's hard to have both, you know. And I think to me, that's why I'm so obsessed with this idea of the tapers. If I can get the tapers right, that gives me the closest thing to that, you know.
Right.
So
No, yes, it is. Well, I was when I started making reads, I was mostly working on the tip. Sometimes like for low notes in the back, all of that. But then I started like, realizing that you need like an overall balance. That is mostly of what. And I normally don't start doing that until like I open the read, I play a little bit, and I just leave it there, like to get like I don't know used to the temperature of the room. I don't know, you know.
sure.
But I'm gonna start like I'm gonna try a little bit like working more while I just open it like as you did today. I will and see, well, maybe that's the answer.
Good, yeah, excellent. All right, well, thank you all for coming to this, and shoot me an email with any questions. Great to meet you guys. Great
Thanks,
to
Drew,
see
for
you.
having this. This was awesome. Do you want to do this every Saturday?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I might have to go play disc golf. That's my only I miss my disc golf. I'm running out of sunlight here. So
Yeah, you probably just need to bring Oberlin down to Miami or down to Florida, it seems, and you know, you can be outside every day.
yes, that would be great. I would love to do that. That's my biggest problem with Oberlin is the temperature. Oh, Dobby, right?
Yeah, here's Dobby.
Hey, Dobby.
He's gonna be 13 in a few weeks.
Wow.
Yeah,
I remember Dobby. He was a little kid.
yeah. All grown up now and afraid of thunderstorms, so.
Oh no. That's one thing you have down there.
Yeah,
Yeah, he looks wise. He's got like some gray, maybe, yeah.
yeah, he's very George Clooney-esque, you know.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, thanks so much, Drew. This was really
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you so much for coming. It's great to catch up and for helping with Kieseker style and everything. It's great. And I appreciate. I'm gonna try all that stuff. Thank you everyone for what you shared. It's like we all just I learned from that. So it's awesome. All right, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.